When reality sets in like it's doing from this pandemic, our world gets changed permanently. And our mind, our body, our souls have to make adjustments so that we can adapt. This time in our country is a call for us to learn how to be kind and loving so that we can make a difference. So now is the time for us to see each person as merely wanting to be loved and to know that they are worthy of love. It's the time for us to change how we react in our life to situations and to other people. And for us to create an atmosphere of acceptance, of non-judgmentalness, and unity. So your question for today is this: what's the one choice that you might make today to easily and willingly recalibrate your own light and aim it for others, allowing your love and your grace to join with the work of the divine? I think that question's worth repeating. What's the one choice that you might make today to easily and willingly recalibrate your own light and aim it for others, allowing your love and your grace to join with the work of the divine? When we recalibrate our life, what does that really mean? Anybody ever seen that plaque that says, "Be patient with me, God's not done with me yet"? I've felt that a lot lately, just with all of the changes that are going on, with all of the ways that we're trying to reinvent ourselves and how to figure out to make these Facebook Live things work. I think that we all know that we're a work in progress as we move about this planet. It seems particularly true that the last couple of months, because we've been going through so many changes, and there is this new normal that seems to be happening. So how do we define safe as we move among others? How do we define who we are now in this new situation? There's a great book called Tattoos on the Heart, and Reverend Gregory Boyle says this: there is no force in the world better able to alter anything from its course than love. Meeting the world with a loving heart will determine what we find there. As our states open up and we adapt to new situations, I think it's especially important that we meet the world with a loving heart. It's easy to judge and be fearful when we are coming out of our safety of our own homes, maybe. Some of us staying very much in our homes to remain safe. And we come out wearing masks and gloves. And then we run into people that have no gloves and no mask. I had a friend of mine tell me it's almost like you see people like before the pre-pandemic, they weren't wearing pants or something. We're so shocked that they aren't wearing a mask to protect themselves. It's like part of their clothing is missing. And I got to thinking about that. And for those of us that are doing due diligence to stay healthy, we might have a tendency to judge other people for not wearing a mask. The Gregory Boyle that I just quoted comes from this chapter called The Slow Work of God. Boy, that's a great thought, the slow work of God. Because it seems that what we're saying is the same as God's not done with us yet. Now, frankly, I'd rather be fully cooked. And I'd like to know that I know exactly who I am and exactly how I'm going to react and exactly what I'm going to be doing. But I'm 71 and that's still not my own reality. And I'm sure that there's other people out there that would say, can't God be done with me by now? But I think we all continue to learn and to change who we are and to adapt as we do what's called recalibrating our light. So how would you go about recalibrating your light, and what does that exactly mean that I put as part of the question? I think it means that we need to be actively having a hand in that slow work of God that we need to be present to people in a state of loving kindness, and that we need to be focusing on tenderness rather than judgment. Sometimes we want to just say, buck up, or deal with it, or quit being such a fill in the blank. I know that in this time and in this day and age, that it's calling for us to be a light. In that same book, Reverend Boyle said this: sometimes resilience arrives in the moment you discover your unshakable goodness. Sometimes resilience arrives in the moment that you discover your unshakable goodness. So in order to really recalibrate our light, we need to discover our unshakable goodness. That goodness that is so deep within us that nothing that happens on the outside is going to change it or take it away. That goodness that allows us to always foster acceptance and loving kindness, and to meet the world with a loving heart. You know, Jesus said, you are the light of the world. He didn't say sometimes you're the light of the world. He said, you are the light of the world. We each have our own light. And it's necessary for us to be who we are, to know what that light looks like for us. And yet sometimes I think we try to make ourselves out to be something we're not. And if you're saying right now, I never try to be somebody I'm not, I would challenge you to look at every aspect of your life. Because I think we all, in some area of our lives, hide our light under a bushel basket. Now that phrase in the Bible shows up in the Bible, and it's important because the thought is that we are being called to be all that we can be, to be all the light we can be. Sometimes I know that things come up and we might hide who we are, maybe out of fear, out of sense of not enough worthiness. We might hide behind a little lie because it seems easier to tell that little lie than to face whatever we'd have to face if we didn't tell that little lie. So how do we become that light in the world and not meddle with that slow work of God that is still working on us? Any of you have those lights in your house that when you turn them on, they come on pretty dim, and then as they stay on, they get brighter and brighter and brighter until they get to their maximum brightness. I think that's a little bit how our relationship with the divine works. When we first start looking at our spiritual lives and start doing our spiritual practices, we have this joining with the divine. And our light might be dim because we're just learning what it's all about. The more grace we have, the more love we have, the longer that we stay in those spiritual practices, the brighter our light gets. Because we become more and more connected to that divine self that lives not only outside of us, but also within us. We always say there is one life. That life is God. And that life is my life, right here, right now. So how do we go about being who we are, which is love, loved, and loving? Can we make an effort to calibrate our light and meet the world with a loving heart? Gregory put it this way: a spacious and undefined heart finds room for everything you are and carves space for everybody else. It's actually a spacious and undefended heart finds room for everything you are and carves grace for everybody else. So what might be your new normal? How can you move into a spacious and undefended heart. And how can you embrace the second part of that quote, which is carving space for everybody else? Because I think that's equally as important, that we learn to aim the light to others. When I was in Portland, I had these 3 beautiful, beautiful old growth trees that lived in my backyard. And I would go out and water my garden, and I would look at the trees, and they were very grounding for me because they were old. They were over 100 years old, and they had that sense of something that had been there in my entire lifetime, for one thing, but it had been there for a really long time. And they had a sense of grace and a sense of majesty just because of what they were and how they looked. And then a tornado hit my yard, and it uprooted one of the trees entirely. It fell. Didn't do any damage, thank goodness. It just fell between 2 houses. And it uprooted the other 2 enough that I had to cut them down. Well, I cried over my trees. I mean, they were a sense of my connection with the divine. I felt so close to that divine nature when I would look at those trees and realize how deeply rooted they were and how they really just branched up to they were very tall. They branched up to the sky, and it was my sense of wow, of wonder about nature. But what happened was the slow work of God showed up as spring rolled around, and my grass got greener, and my plants and my bushes and my flowers that had lived a little bit close to the trees started really growing and blooming and blossoming in a way that I had never seen them, because they weren't living in the shadow of those 3 old growth trees. Now, I know that there are people on the planet that think that their light is so bright that it doesn't matter if it overshadows other people. But the only way that we can have a light that is really the light of the divine that's shining out from within us is not to have it overshadow other people, but when it shines out from us, to aim it for others. To have it be that we are shining the light on them, the same way that the sunshine then was able to shine on my flowers. I think this is a wonderful analogy because we can't be our brightest if we're doing it at the expense of someone else. We can't be our best if our best means that we are not living, carving out a space for everybody else in our heart. There's a poet, Galway Kinnell, and he writes this: sometimes it's necessary to reteach a thing its loveliness. Sometimes it's necessary to reteach a thing its loveliness. Can you imagine what the world would be like if each of us tried to reteach the people in our lives that don't seem to be happy their loveliness? Can you imagine what it would be like if every day we connected with the divine and we looked at other people with a heart of lovingness, seeing everybody else's loveliness? I know there are days when I wake up and everything seems to go smoothly and it's a wonderful day, and at the end of the day I'm still have lots of energy. And then there's those other days where the slow work of God is really not working as well as it could be through me, and things don't seem to be going so well. And the day goes along, and at the end of the day, I'm exhausted. The good thing for me is that I have wonderful friends that are willing to shine their light on me and aim it at me and say, tomorrow's going to be better, or you did a great job, you just don't think you did. They lift me up. So if you're having one of those days, remember that it goes both ways. You can call a friend. You can call a friend and say, I just need a little loving right now. I need a little bit of reality check about how bad things really are or how good things really are. Because it does go both ways. We can allow ourselves to shine our light on others, or we can allow others to shine their light on us. And sometimes we need to allow others to shine their light on us. We need to allow them to show us who we are as we are reflected in their eyes. Because sometimes we don't see ourselves as clearly as we could. Remember, we are loved, and we are loving, so we need to allow other people to love us up. Ernest Holmes, who's our founding father, had a Holmes reader on change. And he said this: every day and every hour, we are meeting the eternal realities of life. And in such a degree as we cooperate with these eternal realities, in love, in peace, in wisdom, and in joy, believing and receiving, we are automatically blessed. Our prayer is answered before it is uttered. So, how do we cooperate with these eternal realities? I think we need to allow our grace to join with that slow work of God. A few years ago, I talked about marinating in the vastness of God, because we all think of God as this vast, infinite thing. And we have to remember that it's not only the slow work of God, but we can marinate in that vastness of God, but marinating takes time. It's the slow work of God that builds this place in our heart where we learn exactly who we are, where we live from that place of knowing exactly who we are. In the book Tattoos on the Heart, Reverend Gregory talked about gang members, and he'd say some of them were just very resistant to ever getting rid of their tattoos because his particular industry provided tattoo removal for gang members. But what he said was, he knew that if he was just patient enough, that they would eventually come around. His philosophy was, all people have innate desire to be good. Sooner or later, they're likely to come around. The slow work of God takes patience. It takes patience. And he wrote this line that I think is very pertinent today. Change awaits us. What is decisive is our deciding. What is decisive is our deciding. So today I want to invite you to decide to recalibrate your life, to really reach for everything that it is that you desire, and to be willing to reteach others their loveliness. I invite you to decide to aim your light for others, to have your spiritual flashlights shined not only on yourself but on other people in such a way that they also figure out that they can shine their light and feel safe, shining it not only on themselves but on others. And I invite you to decide to join with the slow work of God, to have patience until whatever it is that you desire happens, to let love be how you show up in the world, to be filled with loving kindness, with this sense of peacefulness, this sense of ease. Like the meditation song said, it's such a beautiful, may you be filled with loving kindness. May you be well. May you be peaceful and at ease. And may you be happy. It's my desire that everyone that's watching this and everyone on the planet have all of that. That we watch our world from the eyes of loving. That we allow ourselves to be loved. I'd like to leave you with some words of wisdom from a man named Sam King. And they say this: and in the moment that you become disillusioned with your normal satisfactions and ask, what do I really desire? Your soul, rather than your ego, takes charge of your life. In the moment that you are disillusioned with your normal satisfactions and ask, what do I really desire? Your soul, rather than your ego takes charge of your life. Let's pray. So just recognizing right now that God is still working on us. That God that is love and that peace and ease and grace is shining its light on us to teach us our loveliness. Because within us is all of that love and kindness and ability to shine our lights brightly and reteach other people their loveliness. So what I know to be the truth is that each of us are thinking about how we can recalibrate our life. We're thinking about the slow work of God and how we can marinate in the vastness of the divine and find all that it is that we desire. Knowing what we desire and knowing that when we know exactly what it is we desire, that our soul takes over rather than our ego taking charge of our life. So I'm grateful. I'm grateful to know that God's not done with me yet. I'm grateful to know that there is this ability for each of us to shine our light and to stand in the light and to shine the light on others. And I'm grateful to always remember that the God without is the God within each of us. So it's from that gratitude and all of that wonderful feeling of love that I release these words into the law of mind, spirit, and action, because I know the truth, that God does the heavy lifting, and I can just let my life be in his hands. So I say amen, and together we affirm, and so it is. So this is our time for offertory.